I'm going to give you a few of the slang words from the book, and you need to think and try to tell me what they mean in English. Okay, here's the first one. Apipolylogis. Apipolylogis, you got it? It's apologies. Doesn't it kind of apipolylogis, apologies, something like that. All right, here's the second. Babushka. Sounds kind of Russian, right? There's a little bit of that twang there. It means old woman here, old woman. Here's a third one. Grozny. A Grozny means dirty. And the fourth one is something's real horror show. Like, that's real horror show. Horror show? Real horror show. What do you think that would mean? Something bad? No. That means something's really, really excellent. Like this video. The book is A Clockwork Orange by Anthony Burgess. I believe it was released in 1962 originally. And of course, I've heard of the story before. I've heard the title before. How could you forget a title like A Clockwork Orange? But I had mainly known about it because of the famous, I think it was in 1970s, 1972 maybe, Stanley Kubrick film. Same title, same name. So I knew it was a classic, and I knew that it was something that I should read at some point, but it was not a book that I had thought of. It's not in the fantasy genre, which is what I typically read, and it's not in the sci-fi genre, or so I thought. This past week, Goodreads released their like a list of top 100 sci-fi novels on Goodreads, and I was going through the first, I was kind of scrolling through the first dozen or two, and noticed that there were only like 3, maybe 4 books that I hadn't read before. This was one of them. After reading it, I still don't consider it a sci-fi book. I just don't. I don't think that it fits in the sci-fi genre, but it is a fiction, and it is a future fiction type situation, but definitely not sci-fi. Nevertheless, I'm really glad that I read it because it's a really, really good book. Let me give you the story. It's about a young teen, I think he starts 16 years old or so, named Alex, and he's our narrator for the book. We're kind of hearing the story as he's telling it to us. He's narrating it to us. In fact, many times throughout the book, he refers to himself as your humble narrator, which kind of clues us into his personality. He's not friendly. He's friendly in a way, but he's a really terrible, terrible person who's involved in this gang of hoodlums, and he and his teenage friends go around, and they don't just do petty crimes, they do major crimes. They break in, they rob, and they rape people and beat people in very horrendous fashion. And the thing is, the thing that makes it even worse is that he's not doing it for any particular reason other than he has fun doing it and he's bored. It makes him extra unlikable. But for some reason, you have sympathy for him as you read, or at least you should. I did. You start to feel for Alex because through a series of events, he ends up in prison and then undergoing this kind of surgery and therapy. It's not surgery, it's therapy. This kind of test therapy so that they can rewire his desire to do these terrible things and equates doing these terrible, heinous acts with him feeling ill. So anytime that he sees or takes part in something that is violent or brutal, he throws up. He goes through these series of tests to make sure that he really is conditioned out of that behavior, and then he's released back into the real world. You start to see, man, that Alex is just a ruined individual. I don't know if it was through circumstances of growing up or from the surroundings around him, but he just is a terrible person. However, he's broken, and you can see that and sense that. And as he starts to come out on the other side, you start to see traces of his humanity peeking through, and that's what kind of sympathizes the audience with this terrible person. It must be said that some of the horrific scenes are kind of not glossed over, but you don't fully get like explicit depictions because of the slang that Alex is using as he's telling this story. The author made up this slang, Nadsat slang, that has like a mix of Russian and other things, King James Version even of the Bible, mixed in together, and creates a lot of these words that make it difficult to understand what's happening in the first chapter, but by the end, you kind of just understand what's going on. And I found myself in the last few days as I was reading this book, not talking in that slang because it's very difficult, but thinking some in that slang and with that kind of jargon. And it's very interesting. But thankfully, some of these terrible depictions of rape and beating and all of those things are told in this different kind of language, using these different kind of words that kind of softens the blow even just a little bit. I was glued from the beginning to the end. It is a short book, but it is incredibly engaging, and I was drawn to the character of Alex to see what would happen for him. I felt for him as he was going through some of the trials that he was going through, and on the other side, found the ending interesting, which is unique because in the movie and in the original English or US version of this book, it was only released with 20 chapters, and it didn't include the final chapter, which the author brings some kind of resolution that he wanted the readers to end with and wanted us to be our final picture of Alex. But for the US audience and the movie, they didn't want to give us that kind of glimmer of hope, and so it ends pretty dark, bleak, and gruesome. On Goodreads, I gave it 4.5 stars, which is almost all the way there at the top. It is definitely one of my favorite classic works of literature, but I would not suggest it to everyone because it is pretty gruesome. The subject matter is pretty significant and severe at times, but it's fast-paced and, for me, a brutal but yet enjoyable read. Thank you for watching this video. If you would like for me to read and review more classic books, please let me know down in the comments below what classics that I should read. I enjoy a classic every now and again, and it switches up my reading and makes me more well-rounded. As always, thank you for watching this video, for clicking like. If you haven't yet, click subscribe up in the top, join the Dragon Army, and we'll see you in the next video.